Recall expands to include 7 million pounds of deli
Nearly
meat.
150 sick in salmonella outbreak affecting 11
E. coli
countries.
outbreak in the U.S. kills 10 and sickens hundreds.
All these headlines about food safety. This isn't just policy, it's personal. Behind every recall, every outbreak, and every regulation, there's someone whose life was permanently changed or lost. I know that because I am one of them.
Welcome to Confessions of a Food Safety A-Hole. I'm Gennette Zimmer.
And I'm Dr. Darin Detwiler, former submarine guy, longtime food safety advocate, author, and someone who's been speaking up for over 3.5 decades, even when it wasn't easy or popular.
This isn't your average food safety podcast. We're not talking about bacteria and best practices. We won't be teaching you the proper temperature to cook a chicken breast.
165.
Or even how to pronounce Listeria monocytogenes.
Not even close.
We're diving into the culture, the conflicts, and the human cost of getting it wrong.
We'll share stories, some painful, some funny, all true. Revealing the real experiences of someone who's spent a lifetime behind the scenes.
These aren't stories you read about in newspapers or magazines, and they're not found on conference agendas. What they are everyday experiences of people who have dedicated their lives to making sure you have access to safe food.
Because when it comes to protecting every plate, it's not just policy and data. It's personal. And it's time we start talking about it like it is.
Welcome back to Confessions of a Food Safety A-Hole. Darin, there is so much going on this week. You have been featured so much in the news and talking about what I can only call a chaotic number of issues in food safety recently.
It's exhausting.
I bet.
I mean, it's good work. I'm really fulfilled by doing this work, but there are moments where it's like, where am I? What day is it? You know, kind of a thing. And sometimes you hear the same requests or the same topics being brought up over and over again. And other times it's like, okay, completely new topic X, completely new topic Y, completely new topic Z, you know?
Yeah.
Just kind of listing some things off the top of my head. Everything about this recall and that recall and the shooting at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta.
Oh, my God.
Which eerily reminds me of an incident here in California only a few years ago with the environmental health folks. So on one hand, we're looking at people in food safety that are worried about their safety and doing their jobs.
Right.
But also the CDC, they're faced with this idea of how their funding has been cut back so much that there's scaling back of their surveillance programs for foodborne illnesses. They used to track 8 different pathogens, and now they're only working with enough funding to track 2 of them.
That's ridiculous. I mean, I get that they're the 2 big ones, but that doesn't mean that the other 6 aren't important.
Yeah, it's like a driver saying that I can only afford to wear my seatbelt and have my airbag on certain streets.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't want to make fun of the situation,
yeah.
but come on, what are we thinking here? And when we're talking about food safety, and this is the heart of a lot of the questions I get asked, this is not just a series of impacts on the federal level. How does this impact the state level? How does this impact the industry? How does this impact retail? How does this impact us at home?
Yeah.
But there's so much other stuff to talk about. I don't want to get into the details because some of these things are so fresh in the news and they're raw and they're, open for political debate. But here are some things I think that we can talk about that are really not up for debate.
Yeah.
This is a big month. September's a huge month.
Yeah. We have the FDA's Food Safety Education Month,
Isn't that
which
cool?
is a huge positive thing.
Now, mind you, I think that, food safety should be important every month.
Right. But
to have it recognized as Food Safety Education Awareness Month as an official month, I'm still looking for that Hallmark card. But, did you know that this has been around since 1994?
actually, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
So, yeah, back as far as 1994, not too far after the Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak, all these different entities like the National Restaurant Association, the USDA, the CDC, the FDA, they all kind of supported this idea of National Food Safety Education Month to raise awareness of food safety education and to promote safe food handling practices at all levels, including consumers at home.
That's awesome.
It even encourages collaboration between consumers and the food industry in an effort to reduce risk of illnesses. So it's really cool that there's resources, there's promotional activities all around the idea of these safe approaches to food safety.
Also, the big news is that later on in this episode, we're going to have our first guest.
First guest.
Yes, a food safety a-hole all the way from New Zealand.
That's like a different time zone.
Exactly.
Actually, if I remember correctly,
It was another different day.
yeah, we were on Wednesday,
And
he's like,
it's Thursday.
yeah, how's the weather on Thursday? What's the news
Exactly.
like? What are the headlines on Thursday?
Exactly. So our first guest is...
Hi, my name's Steve Adder. I'm the CEO and founder of Equal Protect, and I'm considered by some, or maybe many, as a food safety a-hole.
So what's he here to talk about?
So we're going to be talking with him about Global Glove Safety Day, this will be the second year.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with him to start it last year, and it's on September 18th, which is also my son Riley's birthday. So in the smack dab in the middle of National Food Safety Education Month will be Global Glove Safety Day. And it's really important, to talk about it in terms of the idea how, yes, okay, you can think about one more additional item to a growing list of quote unquote awareness days. But I think this one matters. And it kind of cuts to the very heart of food safety, the idea of being proactive and thinking of gloves as protection. And I'm really excited to talk about his thoughts on it and his experiences in this, and to kind of find out, a little bit more about the behind the scenes that he sees in his world as someone who focuses on these gloves that are tested and they're validated and verified to be as safe as can be.
Right. Well, wonderful. I'm excited to talk to him.
Me too.
Yeah. But first, I want to spend some time talking about another monumental anniversary, which is September 21st. Darin, I'm going to let you take a lead on this one.
Yeah, it's crazy. Numbers sometimes, it creeps up on you. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are aware of the PCA, or Peanut Corporation of America, the trial and the sentencing and the huge recall and the deadly outbreak with salmonella tied to their products. But can you believe it's been 10 years since they were sentenced in a federal court?
10 years. That's incredible. I remember it like it was not that long ago.
Yeah. I got to admit, I'm kind of all over the board in terms of kind of thoughts and emotions on this, because on one hand, I very clearly remember sitting on the phone with Stuart Parnell, who was the CEO of PCA.
Yeah.
He's about a third of the way through his 28-year federal prison sentence right now, and multiple attempts to get it overthrown or heard by the Supreme Court have been all shot down.
Yep.
But he was sitting there talking with me on the phone, and I remember coming to you because you had to hear this.
It was crazy. You're like, you will not believe who I've just gotten off the phone with.
Yeah, he was telling me these things, and I'm sitting there trying to be objective and just listen to him. And at some point, I'm like, that I lost a son during the Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak. And he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but those bastards, they deserve to go to prison."
Right. Those people were criminals, but me, I'm special.
I very clearly, though, remember you and I kind of being shocked by his kind of closing comments, though. Mm-hmm. He kind of threw out this whole, this is all going to blow over. And when it's all said and done, you and I should get together and have a burger and a beer.
How out of touch was this person?
It's like, read the room, dude. A, that's never going to happen. And B, I'm going to be a very old man by the time that ever happens, if it were to happen. There was such a disconnect between what he went into that courtroom thinking the sentencing was going to be.
Yeah.
And what it ultimately played out to be. And there was shock. And I wrote about this over and over again. And we've traveled to do filming for some documentaries and TV shows about this.
Yes, that's right.
There wasn't a lot of media in that courtroom, and I was there, and you weren't allowed to have any devices, so I'm there with pen and paper. I'm writing like, I got a cramp, work through the cramp, work through the finger cramp. And I'm like, okay, then the judge said this, and then his sister was yanked out by the federal marshals because she was flipping off The victims and their families
So
as they
gross.
returned,
So gross.
they were speaking before the judge and they turned around and come back to their seats, and Parnell's sister was flipping them off in the aisle. And I pointed that out to the federal marshal, and eventually she kind of grabbed her arm and yanked her out of the courtroom. And he, mind you too, that Parnell's defense, they worked really hard to make it such that the victims and their families could not testify at all. And ultimately the judge said no, they should be able to. So of course Parnell brings all these witnesses. Oh, he's got these planes and he flies people with the angel flights if they need surgeries, and he knows all these people around the world, and he has these boats and he's part of a boating community.
Trying to give the image that this is just this wonderful charitable person.
Yeah, like Mother Teresa who wears pants. Now, fast forward to about 9 o'clock that night, and the judge is reading off all the months and months and months, and it adds up to 28 years. And now his defense team is like, well, you're going to, of course, Judge, we're going to petition that we release him to his own recognizance until such time he's to report to the corrections department or whatever. And the judge is like, no, you literally brought people up before me to paint him the literal definition of a flight risk. He's to be taken away now. It was just, and then there were screams. There were people on this one side of the aisle, his friends and family, that couldn't believe how long of a sentence that was. Mm-hmm. But there were also people on the other side of the aisle that were shocked how little that sentence was. Mm-hmm. You got to realize that at this time, he was responsible for more deaths than Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And it was a very surreal moment. But at the end of the night, there was this kind of overwhelming sensation of, I'm seeing justice, justicia, as some friends tell me, wield her sword. There was no part of my emotion that escaped the fact that there were 0 state or federal charges filed against Jack in the Box after 1993. And to see this played out, to see someone actually being held accountable for it, I was not impacted by this outbreak in terms of public health sense, but I was so impacted by this outbreak in terms of putting things into context and seeing this with my own eyes, being in that courtroom, helping out the various people to be able to have the strength to share their story and to help the Department of Justice and to understand this. And I wrote about this in my first book, and I've talked about this on the Netflix documentary. I've talked about this on a CNBC special that recently aired again.
The American Greed one?
The American Greed special. And I think it's important for many different levels because it's not just a food issue. It's not just a public health issue. This is where accountability, where justice, where true accountability and the role that consumers play really came to the forefront with this issue.
Yeah.
And yet at the time, it didn't just send a shockwave across the food industry. It was sending a shockwave across multiple industries. The idea that an executive can be held accountable, and realize too that this all kind of relates to the responsible corporate officer doctrine that came out of a Supreme Court decision in 1975. The idea that if you know, now mind you, if this happened and you tried everything to prevent it and it still happened, that is one thing. But we're talking about cases where these people knew what was going on. They deliberately said, I don't care, ship it anyway.
Right.
Or they deliberately, as we saw with the news that came out regarding Boar's Head, that they had multiple reports from the federal government saying there were these problems and they ignored them. Or with the Family Dollar Arkansas Central Distribution Center, that they had multiple state level reports about this rodent problem and decided to ignore them. That is a point beyond which it is not this horrible thing happened to us. It is you could have made a decision to fix this, to mitigate this, to stop this, to prevent this, and you chose not to. And it kind of goes back to the words of the Judge Sands, with the Peanut Corporation of America. When he imposed the sentence, he was basically saying, look, we know that even your witnesses are saying that you are a very good person. But at one moment in time, you made a decision to take actions that were driven by one thing and one thing only: greed. And as a result of that, this was the impact and this is the consequence.
Yep.
And when we don't see that kind of go, no go linear application of accountability across the board, when other people do the same thing, it gets hard to kind of interpret. What do we hold in terms of values and ethics and responsibility and how we hold executives accountable for their wrong actions when leaders become quote unquote bad actors that cause harm, that cause illness, that cause death?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Gennette, it's so easy to get caught up in the past and to debate proactive versus reactive. And I'm sorry that I can't guarantee we won't talk about any of these cases somehow in the future.
Sure.
But why don't we shift gears here?
Nice.
And let's focus on a different view of being proactive. And let's bring on our first guest.
Woo! Our first guest.
We are so happy to have Steve Ardog. As he said, he is founder and CEO of Eagle Protect, which is a company that produces quality disposable safety gloves and premium protective clothing. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you. I'm incredibly honored to be the first guest. I've listened to your whole range of podcasts so far, which is 2, and they're both excellent. And as I think I said to you personally, I love the chemistry between the two of you, which I guess isn't surprising because there should be. But I'm honoured, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that's very, very dear to our hearts, which is gloves and food safety.
Thank you so much. One of the huge reasons why we decided we wanted to have you on this particular episode is because at the time that we will be launching this, it will be 1 week away from Global Glove Safety Day 2025. Can you tell us a little bit about Global Glove Safety Day, how the idea came about, what it means to you, how long you've been doing it, and what you hope to get out of it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, starting at the end, but what we hope to get out of it is a much greater awareness of gloves and food safety. But we started Global Glove Safety Day last year. It was Darin's idea, which we thought was lovely, to commemorate Riley and on his birthday on September the 18th. And as you know, it's National Food Safety Month, or National Food Safety Education Month, I think is the full title. So it was a really good opportunity just to highlight the fact that not all gloved hands are clean hands. And to quote Darin, you know, we assume gloves protect us, but assumptions don't stop pathogens, standards do. And so our whole focus with Eagle Protect since 2006, where we started in New Zealand in 2016 when we came to the US, is to highlight the fact that not all gloves are gloves. There is some real food safety issues, potential dangers with gloves because of the way the standards are met, the way the FDA oversee the standards, and the way gloves have come into the country. So that's really the main point, is just to highlight the fact that gloves are an essential food safety item. The FDA classified them as a Zone 1 food safety item. So they're exactly the same as a knife or a cutting board in terms. But for many, many people, and I've got some stories I could tell you, many, many people do not sort of even see the gloves. They're so far down the food chain of what they're considering as food safety that they just don't even think about them as part of a food safety process. So that's really where it came from, and it started last year. This is our 2nd year, and so we're really glad that we are able to carry it on, and we hope that it'll be many, many years into the future as well.
Wonderful.
Well, especially when you have people, oh, I washed my hands. Okay, but you didn't use warm soapy water, or you just barely got your hands wet. Or, oh,
Yeah.
I cleaned the surface. Okay, but you didn't actually use a disinfectant, or you didn't clean it adequately, right? Oh, well, I wore gloves, but maybe they don't even realize that they're wearing gloves that can be actually the cause of the problem, not necessarily the idea that any glove will do. I don't know why I'm using air quotes here, but imagine my fingers doing the curling things.
Yeah.
But not every glove will do. And I recall 1 to 2 years ago, there was an incredible article in the Journal of Food Protection that really highlighted some of the findings. Steve, what are some of those findings that really kind of underlined and emphasized how you got to kind of wake up and take glove safety seriously?
Well, it sort of started to go way back, and 5 or 6 years ago when we realised that the FTA food compliance for gloves has nothing to do with cleanliness or sanitation. It's purely a chemical content and migration test, which in FDA have never pretended it's anything else. But somehow the industry thinks that FDA food compliance means these gloves are safe for use in anything. And medical's similar, but that's a slightly different story. So we worked with a microbiologist group and said, our customers deserve a better test than this. Can you develop a test for us? So he went about and tested 2,800 gloves, 26 different brands of food and medical compliant gloves, with a view to developing some tests. What we didn't realize was going to happen, that out of that, over 50% of the gloves tested had indicators of fecal matter. We also found 260 different viable pathogens on the gloves, including Listeria, E. coli, you name the poison, it was there, Aspergillus, Bacillus cereus, even anthrax on some gloves.
And Steve, these were gloves that were fresh out of the just open
Yep.
package, correct?
Yeah, totally. New and unopened and tested in, sterile facilities, all these sort of things. So, and we redid the tests on a number of occasions because it's like, this cannot be true. But in fact, none of those gloves were non-compliant because they aren't required to be clean. There's no microbial count, no sanitation requirements or anything. So it was pretty scary.
Wait, I'm sorry.
So eventually,
there's no sanitation requirements for sanitary gloves that people think are supposed to. So they can just shove whatever they want to in a box and call them safety compliant.
Yep. I can tell you the story. The very first factory I went to in Southeast Asia was in the year 2000. So we're going back a few years. And I have to say, I've just returned last week from visiting a whole lot of factories, and the standards are markedly improved. But just to give you an idea, this was even before I started the company. I was doing some other work, and I was in a glove factory in Southeast Asia. I won't mention the country, and the factory is closed now, by the way. So that's good news. But I went through the factory, and it's just, the packing room was just this open room of tables with no walls, just a roof, and your eyes are watering because of the smell of acid and just the stuff in the air. And it was these huge round tables with about 10 ladies around them, and in the middle is a huge pile of gloves. And they're picking out 25 gloves, putting them in a pile, then another 25, etc. And then they put 4 together, stuff them into a box. One person was walking around the tables, and his job was to wipe away the cockroaches and the flies off the gloves before they put them in the box. And these were, and again, I won't mention the brand, but these were American medical grade gloves that were being sent to the States. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no law that doesn't require that.
Well, surely there must have been some improvement during the pandemic.
Probably the opposite, in fact. I mean,
What?
Well, it's just, unfortunately, the things like pandemics bring the best and the worst out of people. And the worst was that gloves were being shipped down from Chinese hospitals, for example, in one example, in several examples, shipped down from Chinese hospitals into Thailand, repackaged into counterfeit boxes, and sent to the States. Now, these were used gloves out of Chinese hospitals that were sent down. It was reported on CNN, and it was the FBI did a bust, and they arrested several people in Thailand. And Americans were part of it, and people just saw the opportunity to make massive money during the pandemic. And one of the things that worries me with all these tariffs, and that's one of the reasons we went to see the factories, is as the factories get price pressure put on them, some of these tricks are going to happen again with the bad factories. And the fact is, easy way to save money is you put 95 gloves in a box of 100, because who counts? Out of the 95, you put in 5 rejects. So you get the reject bin and you put 5 in. So straight away, the factories save 10%. Then you put in 20% chalk in the mix instead of raw materials. So you've saved another several percent. And then you go and get cheaper raw materials, which still make a glove, but they'll give people rashes and skin complaints and be contaminated. So it's and the trouble is, with food gloves, nobody is checking on arrival. So those gloves would not be FDA food compliant, but nobody's checking when they come into the country. So we worry about what happens, and when workers all of a sudden in a food processing plant start getting rashes and itchy hands and these sort of things, it's because of the quality of the gloves has just been compromised, let alone the food safety.
So you would think that no one would want to buy a car with a quote unquote used airbag or with a seatbelt that isn't strong enough rated to actually do any good. And yet I don't think most people are thinking about, beyond the ovens and the knives and the, cutting boards and soap and stuff like
Yeah.
that. They're not thinking about the gloves. It would seem like this is very easy to say, oh, we don't need to prioritize this. Let's just go with the lowest bidder. Have there been times where you've had conversations and this is that kind of moment where you were talking about this with executives and now you can tell you're getting the reaction of, oh, he's just being an a-hole about this issue. He's not really helping our conversation because it's inconvenient or something.
Well, I often say to people, I don't get invited to parties twice. And the trouble is because I tell the story and then people just don't want to hear from me because I'm full of bad news, and that's the big problem with what we. And really, I'm full of good news because I'm saying here's an option. We test gloves on arrival. We have some really comprehensive microbial counts, dermal toxicity tests, all that sort of thing. So there is an option that is actually sanitary and clean, which I'll get into in a minute, because sanitary and clean is what and intact is what the FDA good manufacturing practice says gloves should be. And
Mm.
but I do go to places and I can see people's faces slowly shut down because they don't want to hear more bad news. And it is so far out of their knowledge base that gloves could be a problem that they were literally. We have some really, really good customers who want to know this and be safe and their customers to be safe. And we have others who say, and some of them are big companies who say, listen, gloves are just the only thing we worry about with gloves is price. And I, I get sort of despondent when I hear that with some of these companies. But having said that, through the help of people like yourselves and others, we're getting the story across that just because the glove comes in a nice, fresh printed box, it doesn't mean that the contents are safe or sanitary. And we need more checks on arrival, which is what we do, and we encourage others to make sure that these things are actually safe. They're a zone one food safety item.
I see gloves as having multiple dimensions here in terms of food safety. One is the idea if they're contaminated, once you take them out of the box, then they're already, the
Yeah,
problem. Number two is, and Gennette, I don't know if you know this, there have been a good number of recalls that the cause of the recall is because of glove particles or parts of gloves in the food, like in ready to eat foods.
So it's
yep,
just like breaking off of the glove and going into people's food.
Yeah.
Great.
yep,
It's another form of like plastic, just like metal or glass or rocks. You have this plastic in the food, right? But the third one I want to bring up, and there may be more, but the third one I want to bring up, I remember calling you, Steve, when I was visiting a controlled environmental agriculture facility in Texas,
mm,
and they had a huge hygiene and glove station, and they had all these different kind of gloves, and depending on your task you would wear different color gloves. If you were doing sanitation, you wore one color. If you were doing planting, you wore a different color. And if you're doing harvesting, you wore a different color. And that idea of using the colors of the gloves to really differentiate between tasks to help segment and prevent whether it's cross contamination or what. I thought that was a really thoughtful use of how gloves could be used proactively from
yeah,
leadership down in terms of food safety.
yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things there, and that's an excellent. There's a couple of examples, but one of the things that it makes me remind me of, we call gloves the canary in the coal mine. And I go into a retail outlet or a food processing, and if I look at the gloves, that tells me the whole food safety culture. If you give your front line worker a good glove, that means you care about food safety all the way through. But yeah, the gloves. I mean, we've got a really great customer who's a fast food outlet, 500 outlets in California and other in the surrounding states, and they use a black glove for the guy who takes the garbage out. So there can be no confusion about the person who's making the burgers as opposed to the person who's taking the trash out. We have other areas where they use an orange glove when there's peanuts involved, so there's no cross contamination with allergies, which is important. So there is, and it's growing. It's been used in the sort of the brushes and the brooms and those sort of things for a long time, buckets, so that they don't confuse the buckets with different areas. So now it's moving into the glove, which is great. And I think it's a really good use of colors, which is a really simple technique,
Yeah.
as you say.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Well, it kind of really comes down to the idea of it's a message, it's a culture. It is
Yeah,
supporting your employees, but it really is top down. The idea of food safety is in your hands. And what do you want to do with those hands? Do you want them to start
yeah,
off problematic? Do you want them to be, not clear and transparent, if you will, in terms of not clear
yeah,
gloves, but transparent in terms of, like you said, black gloves for trash or blue gloves for this or orange gloves for that. That's very
yeah.
transparent in terms of what am I doing now, and when I change functions or stations, what do I need to do when I change those gloves?
It's just one of those things that, I think we're just, with the help of you guys, especially raising the awareness so people actually just think about it. And it's not food safety people's fault, because it's just been so far off the radar that it just hasn't been something that people have thought about. But this study, the Journal of Food Protection paper, has just highlighted that there's very little control over what comes into the country. There is a small and important US-based glove manufacturing, which I think provides a really good service. But the fact is, they can only provide 10% of the requirement for gloves in the US, which means we still have to rely on imported product, and that's where we come in terms of making sure it's important, it's safe, and it's important that it's safe when it comes
Yeah.
in.
Well, Steve, I know that you and I have been on stage together a couple times, and I know that we have talked about this idea that, yep, cheap gloves are, you get what you pay for. And yes,
Yep,
better gloves will cost a little bit more. But if you don't go with safe gloves, ultimately you're going to pay a lot more for that recall or that outbreak or that sick employee or that bad
yep,
reputation that comes back to that idea of you went with the cheapest source and the untested source and the inadequate
mhm,
source for your gloves. What are some other key messages that you often share with leaders in terms of why glove safety and glove awareness, uh, better usage, better equipment, all that kind of better materials? What are some key
yep.
messages you have for leaders?
Well, I mean, the really key, we have a tool we use at the moment with potential customers, we call a cash calculator, and it is showing time and time again that cheaper gloves are not cheaper. They're cheaper per glove, but more expensive per month, let alone the potential for a $10 million recall, which I think is the average cost of a recall these days, and the brand damage and everything else. Now, it's just, to me, it's just a no-brainer. Or maybe I haven't got enough brains for it to be a brainer. But I mean, just why would you risk it? And it's just absolutely crazy that you would allow something into your facility, that you're so careful about everything else. You spend years making sure that your cinnamon is safe, and your everything, these ingredients and organics and all that sort of thing, and then you have this thing that comes in, almost uninvited. It's quite incredible. A good glove sends a message to your workers, your employees, that you actually care about them and food safety. There are some very good companies out there, though, that are listening to the messages that us and others are talking about. So I think it's the future is bright, but it's taken a while.
There's an old Navy saying about how a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if anyone
Mm.
really wants to navigate their food safety journey as a leader, the best thing you could do is try to shore up all those weakest links. And in this case, make
Yep,
sure that you have some gloves that are actually worth putting in the hands of those that you want to act as heroes to protect your consumers and to protect your brand.
yep, absolutely. That's well put. And it's true. I mean, that you can have all these great things going on, but if you've got one weak link, it can all fall over before you even know it.
Gloves are one of those things that some people will be like, I don't put two thoughts into gloves,
No.
right? But you start talking about the right kinds of gloves, you're talking not only the science of foodborne illnesses, the economics involved, either proactive or reactive, the politics
Yep.
involved in it. You're literally hitting every major theme of conversation around industry and how gloves kind of sit at the center of it. And I know that's where you focus on things. I just hope that more people start thinking about how important safe gloves are to their bigger operation and their bigger, again, political, economic, social,
Yep.
scientific aspects.
Yeah, and I mean, it's easy. It's not actually a really hard thing to do. It's not like we're asking people to travel across country and, do some major trek. It's actually really easy to do the right thing. And that's, one of our first core values, make it easy. Because funnily enough, people don't wake up in the morning and say, "Yay, it's glove ordering day." It's not one of those things. It's not exciting. And so we often say that our superpower has been invisible, that once we have a 98% customer retention rate in the US, and the reason is once people start using our gloves, they work, they're well priced, and they just turn up on time. And that's all people want, because food safety people have 1,000 things to do. They can tuck the gloves away and get on with the other things that they need to look after. And so that's our focus. And so, yep, there's some great progress being made, and we're going to um, enjoy the future of saving the US one glove at a time, especially
Excellent.
during Food
It's
Safety Education Month.
Yeah.
It's in our hands.
It's in our hands indeed. That's right.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this very, very important topic and conversation, and for being our first guest. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Circling back to the beginning of this conversation, tell me again the date of Global Glove Safety Day.
The date is every September 18th during National Food Safety Education Month, Riley's birthday, and we're really proud to do that and to raise the profile of both your work and our work during that month.
Wonderful. Well, for our listeners, we will be putting a URL into the description of this particular episode for you to click on and get more information.
Well, Steve and Gennette, obviously, I'm hoping that our listeners got a little bit of information there that's totally perfect for Food Safety Education Month. And I look forward to all the good conversations around glove safety, not just on Global Glove Safety Day on September 18th, but year round. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity and support. It's a hard story to get out there, but you guys, well, Darin in particular, but both of you have helped us a lot over the last couple of years. So your reward will be in heaven, as my mother used to say about everything when she refused to pay me for a job I'd done. But, thank you.
Well, that was fun.
That was so much fun. I really enjoyed having that conversation with him. He's such a lovely, interesting person, and he's so passionate about what he's talking about and so knowledgeable about it too. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm sad that we have to talk about this, but it's fun to be able to talk with someone who's, like you said, so passionate about this and is able to bring in the experience and the conversations and the data behind these issues. Because if we can't talk about these things, if we can't find a place for the conversation and engage the stakeholders to talk about these issues, then we won't have these conversations.
Right, exactly. Some of the things that I thought were really, really interesting was the comment about just because they're in compliance with the FDA, it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. And that was just something that it really took it took me aback to hear that, because I think a lot of us as consumers and people who are not in the know of the food safety industry, that this might be the case, especially where it comes to how people are handling your food.
Well, I remember the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. We were in high school.
Yeah.
And
Your senior year.
Yeah. And there was a lot of that conversation about the idea of, well, that's what happens when you get parts from the lowest bidder, or
Right.
well, it's the same kind of thing here. We wonder what happens when we have all these recalls, all these outbreaks. And well, maybe some of it is because some of the equipment, some of the important elements, which gloves in this case is, if we get the lowest standard,
Right.
that quote unquote gets a job done, that's part of the problem. And I'm glad he brought up two things. One is the idea that gloves seem to be very low on the food chain of conversations around food safety.
Yeah, he was even saying that there was somebody who commented that the only thing they care about is price.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Well, I remember one time he was saying that one of the most common things he hears is, I don't really put much thought into the gloves. It's just whatever we got before. We'll just redo it.
Right.
But that goes to the second thought that he brought up I want to comment on, is the idea that when he talked about gloves as being the canary in the coal mine, right? If that is a reflection of your job as a leader, that something as important as gloves is that low on the chain, then what else are you neglecting or overlooking or not even considering?
Well, not only that, but it totally reminds me of your personal litmus test of restaurants when we go into a restaurant to have a meal. And you always say to me, I kind of always judge them by how well do they take care of their restroom.
Yeah, the very public facing element.
Yeah.
You know, the public is not going to go into their closets and their storage facilities and even their kitchens, but they'll go into the bathroom. And if they don't clean their bathroom, I don't even want to know how the kitchen looks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that I talk too in terms of with restaurants or any kind of problem, it comes down to one of two issues. You don't know or you don't care.
Right. Exactly.
How applicable is that to this glove scenario?
Absolutely. I did appreciate that he did end on a much more optimistic note about, first of all, that the key measurement is just raising awareness of the importance, but also that he feels, given the response and, with all the people that he meets with and that kind of thing, he even says he feels like even though it's slowly happening, the future is bright. So that I appreciated that he ended on kind of that optimistic note.
Well, that, and plus when he talked about how, people say, oh, you always talk about bad news. And his take on it was, no, I'm providing you with an opportunity.
Right.
That's very optimistic.
I know. I absolutely love that.
It's funny. We talk about the idea of awareness and allies, advocacy, and even activism. And perhaps there is awareness that one can bring about. But in order to really perhaps be that ally, you have to find the positive take on things in order to be supportive for that positive future.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
I just made that up. No, we haven't talked about that before, but I really think that there is one big difference between when you are aware of something and you're trying to make a difference is that idea of you have to say, what is the next step? What is the call to action? What is our options going forward? How do we measure those and how do we go forward? So can you provide some options for us to do something? Because you just made us aware of this.
Right.
So now what do I do with it? If all you do is make people aware of things, then you're not really becoming much of an ally because you're not giving them a direction or pointing them towards a solution.
Right. Nice. All right. Well, before we end today's episode, I just want to kind of rehash a couple of things. First off, that September 18th is a very big day.
Yes, we have Global Glove Safety Day. It is also right smack dab in the middle of Food Safety Education Month. It happens to be my son's birthday. But if September 18th wasn't already a two-prong attack on food safety and problems with it, the third prong is that a new food magazine out of London will be publishing the first installment of my article, Silent Enemies, which, like I just mentioned about being on a submarine 3 decades ago, I'm making a lot of connections in terms of lessons I learned, like I was sharing about the inspection, in this serialized story. So there'll be multiple installments over time as I'm making these comparisons between the experiences and the lessons I learned on a nuclear submarine during the Cold War and what is going on in food safety today. So this article, or series of articles, if I should call it more appropriately, Silent Enemies, is premiering in September 18th. And you and I have been working on a webpage with resources, galleries, and glossaries. And I've been working with them. We just recorded some videos for social media. So I'm really excited about this. I've talked about it once in front of an audience, and I got some really good response from it. So I'm excited to see this in print.
Outstanding. Well, I can tell all of our listeners that I have read the entire series.
How many times?
Well, let's just say a handful of times. So people don't know how much you torture me with having to read and reread.
Torture. It's more like captive audience.
Captive being the key word.
I saw what you did there.
But I just want to tell you all, it's really good. I highly recommend you looking up the new Food Magazine article. Okay, so I just want to say thank you so much for listening to Confessions of a Food Safety A-Hole. We will have links to both Global Glove Safety Day and Food Education Month, and we'll have a link to the article in New Food Magazine in the description of this episode. Please like, comment, and follow, and thank you so much to all of our new and returning listeners. We really appreciate you. Also, big news, Darin.
What?
3 people have already given us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like being a Lyft driver or being on Yelp or something. That's awesome. 5
Exactly.
stars.
5 stars.
Out of 5?
Out of 5.
Out of 5. 5 out of 5 stars. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, these are some stories that rarely get told. Confessions from the Mind of a Food Safety A-Hole. A podcast we cooked up fresh off the plate. Spilling secrets and scandals behind your food's fate.
Nice. That was fantastic. Except I hate to tell you, but I'm pretty sure the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did that a little bit better.
You caught me again. Caught me again. I'll try better next time.
All right. Well, thanks everybody so much for listening to us, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone. And I proactively want to thank everyone for their efforts during National Food Safety Education Month.